Hello, everybody. So today I'm going to answer the question why I like Donald Trump, why I think he is a good US president for me. And I'm going to start that by saying I'm not American. I'm not in America. I'm Australian in Australia. I've never lived in America. So my perspective is it's personal, but it's also what I think is best for Australia. Now, other Australians will disagree with me, um, but that's the perspective I'm talking about. I'm not talking about whether he's good for USA. I don't care. Okay, so that's the starting. Now, the first thing I want to say also after that is that I don't like Donald Trump as a person. I never have. In fact, when I first heard about him was probably in the mid to late 1980s. I was studying him in a course called Commercial Practice in high school, and I also studied him in legal studies. So I was at that stage considering being either an accountant or a lawyer or something along those lines, and Trump was part of the curriculum. And what we studied with Donald Trump was his strategy for winning lawsuits. And essentially, his strategy at that time, he was one of the most winningest litigants in the world at the time. And he won, I think it was 3 cases for every one he lost. It was somewhere around that margin. And he had a huge number of cases. He was fighting, 1,000 different lawsuits per year. And it was a huge number. And for him to win that high a proportion was just unbelievable. And he had a strategy that we studied, and the strategy essentially was that he made it look like he was breaking the law while he wasn't breaking the law. So he basically skirted along the edges of the law, and we were told, a teacher was like, "Oh, this is a good way to do things." I thought, "No, it's not." And in fact, my study of Donald Trump was part of the reason why I didn't pursue that as a career, because I was like, this is just completely unethical. A lot of the things that Donald Trump would do is that he would trick his competitors into thinking that he had broken the law when he hadn't. And so then they would sue him, and then they'd lose because he hadn't broken the law. And alternatively, he would convince them to break the law themselves, and then he would sue them. And this was a part of a business strategy that he had. Now, this is why he won so many lawsuits and lost so few. And this was part of the way that he built up his business empire. And he's not the only business person to have such unethical practices, but I was appalled by Donald Trump. I did not want to follow him at all. And I'd much rather have a business leader that had inherited their money, and he did to an extent, but a lot of his money was not from hard work, not from ethical things, it was from manipulative processes by pretending he was breaking the law when he hadn't. Now, of course, we all know recently that they pretended he broke the law when he didn't, and changed the laws, and that's completely off the show wrong. And I don't want to excuse that, but the thing is that they only really got away with doing that because of his policy to make it look like he was breaking the law while not actually breaking the law, which is it's pretty much a lifelong thing for him that he's been doing it that way. And some people would say, well, that's fair enough. He got caught out, came back to bite him. There's an argument there. I don't think it's justified, but that's my opinion. Now, the thing is, I didn't agree with Donald Trump. And so why did I end up supporting him? It's not because I like him, because I don't. I don't like him at all. But then you probably think that about most politicians. Now, I've never cared about American politicians. Being in Australia, we don't like America. People may not be aware of that. But here in Australia, just so people are aware, we have alliances, both political and economic and military in some cases, with different countries. And some of them are two ways, some of them one way, some of them benefit us, some of them benefit them. So if you want to compare, let's say, with United Kingdom, and I know United Kingdom colonised us, United Kingdom still own us. We're a federated colony. But our relationship with the United Kingdom is pretty much two ways. We probably have more British come to Australia than Australians go to Britain, but there are still some Australians that go to Britain, and they can go there for 5 years or whatever and pretty much can just move in there at any time they want to. I could go to England and just lived in England for 5 years, wouldn't be a problem. I could get a job pretty easily. Even if I didn't have a job, as long as I had a little bit of money, they'd be okay with me. And that's the thing, and it's sort of a mutual, we could go each way with that. It's pretty much acting like we're the same country. And It's a pretty friendly, nice relationship. Now, equally with New Zealand, we can do a similar trade. Now, most New Zealanders come to Australia, but I could go to New Zealand pretty easily. I could get on their unemployment benefits pretty much straight away. I could get a job really easily. They'd be welcoming us. I think it's about 5 to 1 the amount of New Zealanders that come to Australia compared to every one of Australian that goes to New Zealand. But pretty happy two-way deal. Then we have things like with Japan. Japan buys a lot of our wool, and Japanese tourists go all around Australia really happily, and they go on pie tours. I don't know why they like our pies; they just do. They really like Tasmania. They like to play golf here. They like to buy up our land, and we get a bit annoyed with them buying up all our land, but they're good for us. Japan, positive ally. So you're talking about New Zealand, United Kingdom, and Japan, all positive allies for Australia. Then you have China. That's another one. Now, China, a lot of people think, oh, we should hate China. China are one of Australia's greatest allies. And Chinese people, they come here and they do their tours. Now, some people in Australia don't like Chinese, some people do. And it's a bit of a tense little arrangement, but still very positive relationship. Now, it's very nervous, but it's very positive. And the Chinese people, they come here, they go on their tours. Now, they usually go Chinese speaking tours, and sometimes they badmouth us. And they're probably not as positive as we are with Japan. We buy a lot of Chinese goods, um, and they don't buy that much of our stuff, but it's a little bit tense. It's a little bit against us, but it's close to 50-50. It's okay. It's a fairly pretty much a two-way relationship. It's okay. So now Russia, we have nothing to do with. Besides buying Russian vodka, we don't have anything to do with them. We know nothing about Russia. And in fact, until American TV told us that Ukraine was a separate country, we all just assumed that Ukraine and Russia were the same country. I certainly did. Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, aren't they all Russia? Poland, isn't that Russia? So that's sort of the general view of Australians is we get vodka from there, that's it. We don't care about that otherwise. Now, if you look at polls, we generally hate Russia more than most other countries. I think it's around 75% of Australians that hate Russia, but most Australians don't know enough about Russia to have an opinion. And in fact, all of our views are from American movies, and we know not to trust them. Now, other relationships that we have besides that, well, we do have with Indonesia, which is probably the country we hate the most. So, Indonesia, we do go on holidays there a lot, but pretty much only to Bali. And Indonesia smuggles people into Australia, and that's a big problem. So, a pretty negative relationship with Indonesia. In fact, we're not that far away from an all out war between Australia and Indonesia. That's the country we worry about the most. So, people wondering, there is a genuine fear in Australia that at some point Indonesia will attack. If they did, we would have a war, and that war could last 10, 15, 20 years. It would be a long war. Now, they have a lot more people. We have a lot better weapons, and we have natural environment, all that sort of stuff. Most of our military strategy is aimed at just in case we have a war with Indonesia. And part of our strategy to stop that is to keep encouraging our tourists to go there. So that's again a pretty negative relationship. Now, when we talk about our relationship with USA, now it was pretty much non-existent until World War II. And then in World War II, we did have a few friendships formed because we were genuinely on the same side as USA, fought alongside them. Now, mostly we fought against the Germans, but a little bit we did fight against the Japanese because the Japanese did come close to Australia, and of course the Americans came after them. So there was a little bit of thanks to the Americans there, and they also sort of thanked us, and so it was fairly nice. So Australia's relationship with America has always been military. And then we went to Korea. They were there, the same side. We went to Vietnam. And it was in Vietnam, really, that Americans started to lean on us a fair bit. And after the Vietnam War finished, and Americans started to pressure Australia quite a lot. And a lot of people may know the history of Hawaii. It used to belong to England, and then America pretty much stole it from England and ended up being a state of USA. And sort of we're heading down the same territory is that USA are trying to steal us from England. They're trying to steal Canada from England as well, if you might have noticed the recent news. And it's not really what we want. Now, there is an independence movement in Australia. I think the majority of people in Australia do want to be independent. We had a referendum and we decided not to. And one of the main reasons why we don't want to be independent, and I mean, there are people that do want to be independent, but one of the main reasons not to is because there are these three countries that want us to be a part of their country. Now, those three countries, I've already mentioned Indonesia, most definitely do. We would have a war. I don't think they could succeed. Maybe it'd be very tough for them. Indonesia, in order to successfully invade Australia, would need some backing from somewhere else. And that'd have to be somewhere like Malaysia, Thailand, maybe the Philippines. If all four of them combined, they could defeat Australia. Just. But even then, it's not completely certain. But the second one on the list, China, if China decided to invade Australia, we wouldn't have a war. Even though China's quite a long way away, we wouldn't have a war. And this has been the case for probably about 20 years now. So there was a time when China were not rich enough to take Australia. During World War II, they slumped quite heavily. But yeah, they have boomed, absolutely boomed in their economics. And even though their military isn't quite as high as their economic level is, it's just going to keep going higher and higher. But we are certainly at the stage right now where if China decided to invade Australia, we wouldn't fight. It would be what they call an annexation. And essentially that means that they would come to Australia, we would go, "Oh, we can't fight that many people. Here you go, welcome." And we might still have a few people die, maybe 100, maybe 200, but it wouldn't be considered a war. It'd be called considered an annexation. Now, I know there's some people have claimed annexations are illegal. There are laws about it. Um, I certainly believe that, for example, the annexation of Crimea by Russia, that's claimed to be an illegal annexation. I don't think it is. In fact, you don't actually need a referendum for it to be a legal annexation. So if, for example, China came in here and we said, "Oh, you can take it, no worries," that would be legal. And so that whole Crimea thing does confuse me a bit. They not only took it legally, but they also had a referendum. But anyway, I'm, I'm beside the point there. Um, is that, yeah, there's, right, we don't necessarily want to become a part of China. Um, I think a lot of people would be afraid because we would be forced to speak another language, and Chinese is very difficult to learn from English. And there's Aboriginal people that want Australia to go back to Aboriginal lands, and there's like 1,000 different Aboriginal countries, and they don't necessarily all like each other. In fact, I think they hate each other. Um, so Australia wasn't one land; it was 1,000 lands, or 1,085, I think it was. But yeah, so if China took us, would surrender, and why would China want to take us? Well, they want our land. It's quite a big landmass, and they could move even if they didn't move half their population. They've got, what is it, 1.4 billion. Let's say they move 100 million here, or maybe 300 million. And there's a lot of empty spaces. I think it's 97% of Australia is uninhabited. They could take our land. And okay, it's not very good for people to live on, but China have different ways to turn deserts into forested areas and so forth. And they have the money, they would just do it. Now, I actually think that China conquering Australia wouldn't be awful. It would be challenging mainly because of the different language, and we might have to work a different amount, and our culture might change and all that. I don't think it'd be completely horrible because China have always treated us fairly well. I know some people say, "Oh, the Chinese Communist Party, we'd be censored." Or that. We're already pretty censored. So yeah, look, it might be worse, might be better. They've always treated us fairly well, and I don't actually think it's a guarantee that they'd force us to speak their language. If nothing else, Chinese is not one language; it's a number of languages, and I don't really think that they would be too put off by letting us continue to speak English. Maybe they'd say, "All right, you can speak English or Mandarin or English and some other language, and we might need to learn a second language, but I think we'd still be allowed to speak our own regular language that we do now." So that's the Chinese option. So we've got the Indonesian Chinese option. The third option is America. America could invade. They could do to us what they did to Hawaii and just take us over. Now, again, like how I said that no one will stop China, equally no one will stop USA. And you could say, well, USA is stronger than China. USA defend us against China. They wouldn't. Simply, they wouldn't. Nor would China defend us against USA. And as for Great Britain, who technically own us, they would just go, "Yep, that's fine. Off you go." Yeah, and USA, you might think, oh, that'll be great for Australia. Having USA, we all get to still speak English. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Wouldn't that be amazing? What do you think America's going to do to us? Do you think that they're going to be nice to us? And no, they're going to exploit us. So look at what they did with Hawaii. They've set up Australia as a holiday destination, particularly the places that people like to go to for holidays. So the Whitsunday Islands, the Great Barrier Reef, pretty much all of Queensland. The Northern Territory is a tropical um, outback experience. And of course, you've got Sydney and Melbourne for their different things. Sydney Harbour, not much really, but it's a city. And you've got Melbourne. I'm not even sure what is in Melbourne, but you know. And Tasmania has the cleanest air in the world, so they've got that. I'm sure there's something in Western Australia, great areas. And they basically try to work out ways to exploit us. They already got military here. They just amp that up. We have some of the harshest conditions, great for training soldiers. They could just amp up all of the military um, bases here, and they can send out all the spy satellites. They're not going to get attacked, and do all of that whilst pretty much destroying our environment, our people, all of that sort of stuff. And yeah, some people think that'd be great. That's good for them. Others think it'd be horrible. Now, I guess the difference is, so how I was saying how China are nice to us, relatively nice. America's not. They have exploited us, especially since the end of the Vietnam War, and it's been getting worse. And our relationship with USA is one of the worst out of our relationships with anyone. They force us to go to war for them, and they do nothing for us. We promise that they will do something for us one day. Maybe they will, but I can't imagine any scenario where they would. Maybe they'd help us out if Indonesia attacked, but they probably wouldn't, realistically. They'd probably just stay out of that one. Yeah, let's just stay out of that one. None of our business. And they certainly wouldn't help us if China attacked. Let's just be honest here. And then there's the chance that they would attack. Now, I'm not saying they would attack tomorrow, but there was a threat when Kevin Rudd was in power that they would. And it's sort of a America has that habit of betraying their allies and just snap, suddenly you're being invaded. And this is the problem. So what I want out of an American president, getting back to Donald Trump finally, is that I don't want them to invade us. I don't want them to be putting us in a situation where we have to go to war with our allies. And now, okay, we went to Iraq. We don't have a relationship with Iraq. We never did. Who cares? But it made an extra enemy for us. It's not nice. I don't like having enemies. We already don't have that issue with Indonesia. We don't want to have Iraq haters. But we had to go. We were forced. And then with Afghanistan, now Afghanistan we do have a relationship with. Now Afghanistan, our relationship with Afghanistan isn't amazing, but it was good. So just for people not aware, all the camels in Australia, there's a huge amount of camels. I think we have more camels here than anywhere else in the world. They come from Afghanistan. So the Afghans came in, I think it was 1853, somewhere around then, and they helped us to build railroads and all that sort of stuff. And that's where we got all the camels. So we're not best friends with Afghanistan. We're not like we can just act like one country like we are with the United Kingdom or with New Zealand. So we're not like that. But we're friends. We were. Now we're enemies, sort of. They pretty much hate us. They've threatened to kill us. They're a bit confused. Why would we go to war with them on behalf of America when we like Afghanistan? It was a strange thing. And there's the possibility that we might be forced to go to war against China. We really like China. And I mean, even going to war in Ukraine and sending peacekeepers there. And I mean, granted, we don't like Russia. We really, really don't. But we don't like Ukraine either. We don't like either of them. It's not like we suddenly, oh, we love Ukraine, but we hate Russia. You know how many countries in the world genuinely feel like that? It's pretty much those Baltic states, the Latvia, Lithuania, um, Estonia, and then Poland are pretty much the only countries in the world that actually could like Ukraine and not Russia. Genuinely. Everyone else, Ukraine, Russia, the same. So, how we feel about Russia, we've got to feel the same way about Ukraine, which means we stay the hell out of it because, and that's the thing. Why are we making another enemy? And the difference between that and Iraq, who we also had no relationship with, is well, Russia has nuclear weapons. Iraq doesn't. This is a bit of an issue. Russia is significantly stronger than Iraq. They're quite scary. Okay, they probably will go there and go, well, Australia was forced in, but what if they don't? What if they decide, well, let's just throw 50 nukes in Australia? Okay, it's probably not worth it for them because realistically, not enough of us, not really, we're not much of a threat, but it's a big thing to do. So I want a president that doesn't do that. So I can go back through all the different presidents in my lifetime. It's not a Republican Democrat thing. I'll be honest here. Now, again, the first one of these that I noticed was Bill Clinton. He seemed like a nice guy. He was smoking marijuana. Well, fine, you can do that. And the whole Monica Lewinsky thing seemed ridiculous. Like, why was he impeached over that? It had nothing to do with anything. I mean, seriously, I thought it was just the whole impeachment process was ridiculous. What had Bill Clinton done wrong? Now, I didn't really pay attention to Ronald Reagan, I've got to be honest, but the only thing I noticed was that he said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall. And he ended he ended the war, ended the Cold War. Great guy. Then we had George W. Bush, sorry, George Bush Sr., we just called him Bush at the time. Horrible person, started the war in Iraq, and I hated him for it. Then we had, and I might have him in slightly the wrong order, George W. Bush was a bit of an idiot. Let's just be honest. Like, we just all called him W, made fun of him, he was an idiot. He was harmless. But he did kind of start the war in Afghanistan, but it's a bit of a puppet. But, well, I mean, it was pretty harmless. Then we had Barack Obama, who everyone said, oh, first black president. I'm like, doesn't black mean you're descended from slaves? I mean, that's what I always thought. I always assumed that you were considered black if you were descended from slaves. He was not descended from slaves. He's just an African. He's African. He's about as black as Elon Musk. I mean, seriously, you're calling him black. So he came across as a bit of a fraud. Now, I found out a few other things about him since then, but certainly was very fraudulent. I didn't think, oh wow, he's killed Osama bin Laden. I mean, you've assassinated someone and you're bragging about it. There were a few issues about it, but I could never prove it. And then there was the Kevin Rudd thing, and you go, oh, you got rid of our Prime Minister, you bastard. He threatened, and we don't know if it came directly from Barack Obama or if it came from Hillary Clinton or from someone, but he threatened to invade us. And I'm like, what the hell, Barack? Barack, what are you doing? You're your friends. Why are you trying to invade us? No, he didn't invade us, but he got rid of our Prime Minister on the threat of invading us. What the hell, Barack? What the hell are you doing? You didn't deserve that. Why don't you be friends with China? And that really, like, that was, we didn't find out about right at the time. I mean, WikiLeaks took a while to get that information out there. And there's still some people that are debating the veracity of that. And they say, oh, he didn't really do that. Or, oh, it was Hillary Clinton. Oh, it was fine. It was fine. It was fine. But, there were a lot of people that were looking at that and they didn't really think, oh, yeah, Hillary would just go completely against Barack. Oh, Barack said, oh, Hillary, just go and have a chat to him. And Hillary goes there and goes, we're going to kill you. Hillary was acting on Barack's orders. Now, we've got that little debate there. But certainly it was Barack's orders. Well, not certainly. We don't know what Barack's orders were. We do know what Hillary did. And we do know the result, which was, bucko, Mr. Rudd. And it wasn't just, oh, we got rid of Kevin Rudd and then we had Julia Gillard and, yeah, we got our first female prime minister, sorry, in Australia. First female prime minister. But it destabilised our whole country. And, you know, even now, we don't know who our Prime Minister is. Anthony Albanese, who's that? We've had no names. We've had increasingly no name Prime Ministers pretty much since Kevin Rudd. We used to have big name Prime Ministers, people we knew who they were. And, I mean, Malcolm Turnbull was okay. I'm trying to think who the other Prime Ministers have been. I mean, Anthony Albanese, I struggle to know his name. I'm not sure what he ever did. He's pretty much as invisible as the Invisible Man. And all of that is because of Barack. I've got to be pretty annoyed with Barack. Now, after Barack left, Donald Trump came in. And look, I've said before, I'm not a big fan of Donald Trump. People are saying he's sexist. I'm like, so? I'm not a woman. Why do I care if he's sexist? He can be sexist. So does racism. I'm not black. Why do I care? So, I don't know if he is sexist or if he is racist. Some people have said he is, some people have said he isn't. And the same for both. But it's not really relevant. Maybe it's relevant if that's relevant to you, but it's not relevant to me. It's not relevant to Australia. And again, I've got to separate running USA versus running the world because the only bit that I care about for US president is how they're affecting us here. So Barack Obama might well have been an amazing president, but he stuffed us up. So I don't like him for that. I don't hate him as much as either of the Bushes, particularly the first Bush, the senior Bush. He was horrible, but he didn't help us. He hurt us. Ronald Reagan helped us, and Bill Clinton, nice guy, didn't hurt us, didn't help us, sort of in between. So you've got to look at that, and I look at when we had the Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump thing. I was like, well, Hillary, was that just Barack Obama's orders, or was that you? Was that you interpreting orders, or was that Barack Obama's orders? Are you going to do that again if you're president? Are you going to do worse? And of course, we had the WikiLeaks exposed her emails. Now, that just had more of the same sort of stuff as what she'd done about Kevin Rudd. I just confirmed that anybody who was doubting the Kevin Rudd thing would be like, oh, she did this to like 30 other countries. Oh. And she was threatening to kill Julian Assange, the head of WikiLeaks, having executed. She wanted to bring him down, having tried for treason and executed. He wasn't even an American citizen, he's Australian. She wanted to have him executed. And then he's in jail and he's in the Ecuadorian embassy and he was in America, British prison, and he was all this sort of stuff because he exposed her. Holy shit, why do you want someone like that as your president? Why was she the Democratic nominee? Surely they could do better. It worried me. And I'm like, well, bro, Donald Trump might not be perfect. For perfect. He might even be the worst president ever. But Hillary Clinton looked like she was going to be worse. And realise this. These were potentially the two worst candidates you could ever have. But Donald Trump didn't look like he was likely to invade Australia. Hillary Clinton looked like she was likely. So I'm just going to be honest here. That was why I said, well, I'd rather Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump's actual term, if we ignore the COVID-19 thing, I think we could say it was a pretty good term. The North Korea thing, fantastic. The Israel thing, amazing. Queen Elizabeth II thing, but probably the big problem, how we handled the pandemic was awful. And I mean, he's saying, oh, it's a democratic hoax. Oh, it was not a hoax. Oh, it's the China virus. Well, okay, you can call it the China virus because COVID-19 is a stupid name. But blaming China for it was stupid. He refused to put in lockdowns. I mean, saying, oh, we'll have a vaccine, that'll help out. It's like, Mr. Trump, that'll take like 2 or 3 years. What are you waiting? Oh, Operation Warp Speed will help us a lot. He was one of the worst countries, and I actually did a list of what were the worst countries, and he was like third worst. He wasn't the absolute worst. Italy was worse. Um, even South Korea was pretty much on par with him. Italy and Iran were the two worst, and they hurt the world more than USA. But USA was probably third worst, equal with South Korea, and that was pretty bad with how he handled it. And I think if we'd known we were going to have that pandemic, and if we'd looked at what Hillary Clinton might have done, well, what would she have likely have done? She would have likely had lockdown. She likely would never have pushed vaccines and wouldn't have allowed people to use things like remdesivir and all that sort of stuff. And I think the problem is, for America, it might have been all right, but who was going to have those three vaccines that everybody used? Well, we certainly used here. Would we have relied on AstraZeneca? But look, certainly, I think you can say that he stuffed it up. He should have done better. And we were then headed to Donald Trump versus Joe Biden. Now, I knew very little about Joe Biden except for he was the vice president and his son Hunter Biden did something in Ukraine with Burisma Holdings. And the thing is, I mean, I have to look at the first impeachment that I knew about, which was with Bill Clinton and the Monica Lewinsky thing, and that was complete nonsense. And I have to say the second one with Donald Trump over Hunter Biden was complete nonsense. I think they're both nonsense, and both of them realistically think they were fine. They should never have been impeached for either of them. And I would have loved to have seen at the time, so this was 2019, for Hunter Biden to have been correctly prosecuted and investigated. And we did eventually have that. He was found guilty. Oh, they only did it for tax evasion. I would have liked him to have been investigated for everything. See what he'd done and see what, if anything, it had to do with Joe Biden. I think the problem with the impeachment for me was that it assumed that he was not guilty when he wasn't not guilty, and it refused to investigate it, and that smelled of corruption to me. Now, of course, just because your son's corrupt doesn't mean you are. Maybe Joe Biden was okay, but of course, then there were the hints. The fact that they impeached Donald Trump over that worried me a lot about Joe Biden, and then the fact that Twitter and Facebook and even YouTube, hello YouTube, censored people so they couldn't publish anything about the Hunter Biden story, and they were banned for it. That worried me a lot, and I sort of felt, what are you hiding? Nonetheless, I thought Trump did a bad enough job. It was 50-50 for me. I didn't care which one got in. So Joe Biden got in. I gave him a chance. I was like, okay, see how you go, Mr. Biden. And I still remember he undid pretty much everything that Trump did, which is just dividing the country. You don't do that. You at least see some merit in your predecessor. And he just, it's like, okay, undo some of the ones we think are bad, but he was just undoing thousands. It was horrible. And then, I mean, he took credit for the vaccines and lied and said, "Oh, Republicans were anti-vax." Oh my God. And Anthony Fauci was on there, and we knew Fauci hated Trump, but he was lying too. And I'm like, "Oh my God, you guys, you're like Dumb and Dumber. You're like Tweedledee and Tweedledum, you two idiots." And it was an issue. I mean, the withdrawal from Afghanistan, I can't imagine anyone else, not just that Trump would have done better. I think anyone would have done better. It was easy. Just get the equipment out, people out, have the soldiers at the end. Do it in the right order. It's not hard. So stuff that up. And then it's almost as if to prove himself, he started the war in Ukraine. Now, look, I know it's been a long policy of America to leverage Russia against China because they know that if Russia and China ever become friends, USA is finished. And obviously, starting the war and forcing Russia to invade Ukraine was a part of that because Ukraine and Russia are essentially the same country. So the longer the war goes on, the more it hurts Russia. And I mean, eventually, we know inevitably Ukraine will become either friends with Russia like they were before, or just become part of Russia. And they're the only two outcomes. So the more people that die, it doesn't matter which side dies, the better it is for the USA. And that was the whole point of it. And it was to leverage, um, make Russia an unattractive ally to China. China would go, oh no, they want to touch you. And therefore they'd never merge and they'd never ally up, and USA would be fine for a lot longer. But and look, I could accept that as the reason, and him saying, "Look, Putin, we won't hurt you. Just come in, just leave Poland alone." Thank God, I remember him saying those sort of stupid things. Like, couldn't you meet with him? Couldn't you have a little summit? He's left troops on the border for like 2 months. Couldn't you go in and say, well, "What do you want, Putin?" He just refused to meet with him. It wasn't just he refused when they invaded, but he refused the whole time. Like, he never met with him. They've got this massive war going on. You're not meeting with him. They're trying to have peace treaties. America's not getting involved. What the hell? In fact, America's going around there trying to stop the peace treaties from happening. What the hell? What are all these sanctions? I mean, the sanctions. Okay, I understand the sporting sanctions. I understand the freezing assets. That hurts Russia. What were these trade sanctions? They're hurting us. Do you know how much our cost of living went up thanks to America's war in Ukraine? That went up. We're suffering. I had no idea we were buying so much American oil and gas, but apparently we were. And it's, they're stuffing up all of their allies. Why America? Why is Biden stuffing up allies? If he wants to invade, force Russia to invade Ukraine and all that sort of shit, Do it with your own money. Don't use ours. That really upset me. And I mean, we're struggling. Everybody's struggling. It's not me personally. It's the whole country. And several other countries. We're all supposed to support a war that hurts us. Russia really don't like being kicked out of the Olympics and they were already kicked out for drugs, obviously, or state-sponsored drug abuse, whatever it was. But making all the sporting bans and kick, getting rid of their boxing or weightlifting, all that sort of stuff hurt them. Freezing their assets of private citizens hurt them. Stealing their gold hurt them. But stopping McDonald's being in Russia did not hurt them. It helped them. Hurt us. So punish Russia at least in the right way. At least in a way that actually hurts them. Not with the trade. The trade stuff didn't hurt them. Hurt us. Not them, hurt us. And that was the thing. Like he just wasn't sensible. And it, the amount, I mean, it kept going for so long. The nuclear threats, the World War III threats. Should it, if they just stayed out of it, if America had just stayed out of it, it's over in a week, it's over in a month, mate, maybe, not 3 years. It's still going. And then he knew that Trump was going to end it, so he Trump proofed everything to make sure it could keep going. You're not just messing with your allies, not just one ally, you're messing with the world, with the human race. And now I started off saying, oh, 50-50 Biden, Trump. By the time he's doing all that, I'm like, Biden, you're the worst president in history. Like the absolute worst. And however much you didn't like Trump, that's Trump. That's Biden. In fact, Biden's off the screen. And I'm not saying Trump was the best ever. Of course not. He had a lot of issues. But he's not doing all that shit. I mean, this is unheard of stuff. This is just disgusting and awful. People, it wasn't in the news anywhere near as much as it should have been. All the censorship where we're spreading propaganda. Every war has propaganda. That's fine. It's acceptable. But it could have ended it at any time. Didn't even want to try. And now we've got Trump in power again. And I mean, what was Kamala Harris was about as invisible as Anthony Albanese. She was a nobody. I don't care. Oh, she's black and she's a woman. Wow. Also Indian. I mean, I'm not sure if she was black. A bit worried because of Barack Obama wasn't black, but some people say she was. I mean, black and Indian, you can be both. You're allowed. But that's not a reason to vote for you. Wasn't enough. It wasn't a reason to vote for Barack Obama either. And but she was a nobody. And I mean, I'm not saying Kamala Harris might be better later on. She might make a good president one day. But she wasn't. She was a nobody at the time. And the thing is, on top of all the other stuff Biden was doing, I know he'll say, "Oh, I never went after Donald Trump." Somebody did. A few people did, and it was horrible. And if you want to look at it realistically, out of all the things he was charged with, the only thing that he could have been charged with without massively changing the law was the overestimating and underestimating assets one. The amount that he was fined for that, or his company was fined, was about 20 times more than what the maximum should have been. Now, he still might have been sued for that if he was a private citizen, but I think it was $2.5 million damage and they ended up fining him 480 million. It's a ridiculous amount of difference. Surely you pay the 2.5 million and that's you shake hands, settle out of court, that's all you do. And realistically, with an amount like that and considering that he was a presidential candidate, I think realistically, if the others didn't exist and the others shouldn't have existed, you would have had that one wouldn't have happened. It's too minor. And they made it a federal thing. Oh my God, they changed all the laws. They had assassination attempts against him. And the amount that was against him was so disgusting. I mean, I know he wasn't a perfect president, but he wasn't that bad. Where's all this hatred against that should have been against Biden? Biden's the one that stuffed everything up. But no, not there. Because again, the far left extremists want to kill people. Now, I know there's far right extremists too. What do the far right extremists do? Well, I'll tell you. Far right extremists are racist, they're sexist, they're homophobic, they're transphobic, very set in their ways. They might have a lot of guns, with Bible bashers. I get sick of them. I can't handle far right extremists. I block them all over the place. I get so sick of them. Far left extremists kill people. Far right extremists, not so much. Far left extremists, oh, they're evil, they're evil, they're evil. They kill people who support them. Far right extremists go, you're an idiot. Kill, you're an idiot. I mean, I hate them both. Don't get me wrong, but one is a bit more dangerous than the other. And that's the thing, is that I think you find that rather than left or right, the people that are swing voters, and no matter which side you end up going in any individual election, they tend to be a bit easy to handle. And I'll just give you a little hint. Donald Trump is not a far right extremist. He's just not. He's kind of a centrist. He might be centre right now. Call him a populist rather than a far right. Elon Musk, his life was far left. He's a centrist. And what's that woman, Tulsi Gabbard? Mostly left. She's a flipper. They're not far right extremists. Elon Musk's not a far right extremist. What's his name? RFK Jr., mostly left. They're not far right extremists. Donald Trump is not hiring a bunch of far right extremists. He's hiring a bunch of centrists, the flip floppers. They're not way on the right. They're in the middle. They're my people. They're my centrists. The people that were with him in his first term betrayed him. A lot of them did. They were. I mean, I don't know if they were far right. I didn't even know who they were really. But the people he's got now, at least some of them, they seem to genuinely, overall, certainly people like Tulsi Gabbard, RFK Jr., and Elon Musk seem to be pretty good people. I don't know about all of them. Maybe some of them are jerks, but he genuinely has better people this time than last time. He had some good people last time, but he had others that completely betrayed him, like Mike Pence, for example. And that was his vice president. You don't want to have your vice president be the first one to betray you. And I mean, not necessarily the worst to betray him, but a pretty big betrayal there. And and that's the thing that, I think at a guess he was getting far right extremists on his lot because people falsely accused him of being a far right extremist. And look, I think he is heading in a better direction. Do I want him to take Greenland? Do I care? In Greenland? I don't care. In fact, from a military point of view, I actually don't think Greenland's all that important. But Canada and Mexico, there's been lots of theories about this. That if Russia and China do ally up, USA will have to take Canada at least, and probably probably Mexico. They'll have to annex them both. And they're not going to have a war. Canada's too weak. Mexico's too weak. They just say, okay, here you go. And that's the thing. And I don't know. Greenland is a bit of a weird one to me. Greenland seems to have very little value, but and I think there was Panama Canal as well. I want to. Okay. Um, yeah, I don't see them as being completely ridiculous, and he's also not forcing it. He's just sort of getting the idea out there, and I think it's a reasonable idea. And yeah, and also for people not aware, it is if China and Russia do ally up, it is inevitable for USA to lose their position as the world's leader unless they join with them. And that's a thing that I know you don't want to be on the same side as them, but if you are on the same side as them, you may be able to keep your position as the world's leaders. It seems completely ridiculous, but right now, if there was a war between on one side USA, China, and Russia, and on the other side every single other country in the world, those three would win. Easy. Wouldn't even be a fight. wouldn't even be a fight. You could have absolutely every other country, and I think there's what 185 countries. You could have 182 on one side and those three on the other. Those three are going to win. Not only that, of those 185, a fair number of them are going to go over that side anyway. For not just for alliances, but just because they realise, oh shit, we're going to lose. But even if they didn't, even if all 182 stayed completely solid, those three are going to win by such a big margin. Now, if you have USA on that side and China and Russia on that side, China and Russia's going to lose. But if they ally properly, they're going to win. The only way for USA to stay powerful is to ally with those two. I'm not saying I want that to happen, because if they don't, well, I'll just go clear here. If it's USA on one side, China and Russia on the other, Australia's going to get taken over by either China or America. If all three ally, probably fine. But anyway, and also if it's two against one, you are going to have a world war. USA on one side, China and Russia on the other. If all three are on the same side, probably not going to have a world war. Probably have a bunch of annexations. You're probably all going to have all of us just saying, "Oh yeah, fine, change the world," but it's not going to necessarily be worse for anyone. So yeah, I think that Trump understands what the world needs, and I know he's not perfect. I, I don't like him, but I think he's setting up the world not just for his 4 year period, but for beyond that. Um, and look, you know, as long as he ends that war in Ukraine, I think we're fine. What he's doing with Israel, it's not great. I'm not necessarily. I stay out of that because I've learned a long time ago. I do not give opinions about Israel, positive or negative, because anytime I do, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. So I'm just. I don't. I mean, I do have opinions on that, but no, there's some opinions just not worth it. You know, I'm not legally Jewish. I do have relatives that were Jewish, but legally, it's the way that Jewishism works. I'm not legally Jewish. Also, not legally Muslim, Arab, none of that. So I'm out of it. I'm staying out of it. Neutral. Nothing with me. On a side note, the Snow White, I still haven't watched it. Some people are saying it's absolutely horrible. I noticed that it actually has decent ratings in Rotten Tomatoes, not great. And it seems as if there's a bit of a pile on IMDb. Um, and yeah, they tried to hate on Barbie. Barbie was a great movie. Snow White, look, I've never seen it. Um, but yeah, I mean, I, I've actually read some of the traditional versions of it before Disney added the Seven Dwarfs, because it was like some different versions. It was just Snow White and the Huntsman. Some of them had Snow White and Rose Red. I love the Snow White and Rose Red version. There were two sisters. Um, and there's a lot of different versions it was based on. And I actually don't like the Seven Dwarfs being in it. I'd rather them go back to a traditional one without Seven Dwarfs. I think it makes a better story. I think the Disney version with the Seven Dwarfs, you don't need dwarfs in that story. And I know that nowadays they have this whole thing, gotta have dwarves playing dwarves, and yet they don't let you call them dwarves because they're little people. Don't understand why we can't call dwarves dwarves. It's called dwarfism. I'm sorry. If you're a giant, you call yourself a giant. You're quite proud of that. Why are giants proud to be giants and dwarves are scared of being called dwarves? That's just stupid to me. You are who you are. If you're black, you call yourself black. If you're a dwarf, you call yourself a dwarf. Peter Dinklage is a dwarf. He has dwarfism. He is a dwarf. If he wants to call himself a little person, he can, but he is still a dwarf. And if he wants to fight for dwarf rights, he has to admit that he's a dwarf. He played a dwarf in Game of Thrones. He was great. He's a great actor. I love him. Why is this thing so political? Just don't have dwarfs in Snow White. You don't need dwarfs in Snow White. You don't need them. I'd much rather have something. If they were going to remake it, I'd much rather them remake it without the dwarves, because the dwarves were a Disneyfied version. There were some thoughts that they stole the dwarves from Lord of the Rings from J.R.R. Tolkien and just added them there to sort of make it more entertaining. And I don't like that. So I'd rather, if they're going to redo it, get rid of the dwarves. And I mean, do I care if they're race swapping? I don't know what they are, but everybody seems to be race swapping nowadays because too many traditional things are white people. Fine, do a black one. You know, set it in some other country. But can you have Snow White and Rose Red? I love that one. Just me. Just no, don't have dwarves. Snow White and Rose Red. I mean, I like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the Disney version. Not going to say original because that was not the first version, but I loved it. It was done really well. But I would have loved to have had Snow White and Rose Red. That was my favourite of the traditional version. And when I'm thinking of this, The Little Mermaid, I like the one where she hated walking on her feet and they felt like knives cutting into her feet, and that she turned into sea foam at the end. Why don't they do an original version like that? You know, even Ponyo, which was like the Japanese version, of it was lovely. Why do they have to try to make it woke? What's the point of woke? Isn't woke meant to be colorblind, so you shouldn't care? You know, why are you changing the race of main characters in existing stories? Why not have new stories that have these races that you want to represent? Should be representative, yes, but you shouldn't change historical things. I mean, I remember with Dumbo. Dumbo had a lot of blacks in there and slaves. They got rid of that bit because they're like, oh, that's racist. They're black characters. They got rid of the drug, the crows being drugs, and they were blacks, black crows. Yeah. It's 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 interesting how they do these things and they keep changing it, and I do find those sort of things curious. It's like you could easily have new stories, and there are a lot of stories to tell. And you know, I've been doing a lot of research on Africa and how before recorded history, so recorded history 6,000 years ago, um, before then, for most of that time before that, Africa dominated, and there's a lot of stories that we have given to be white stories that were actually African stories, and we could talk about them. Um, we can talk about how the actual orcs versus human things was real, but humans were black and orcs were white. And we're the orcs. So if you wanted to do it properly, yeah, we did beat the orcs. That was a real thing, and we did call them orcs. Well, we might have called them other words like goblins and trolls and ogres and all that. We were the human. We won, but we were black. They were the white guys. Maybe I don't think they had green skin. Pretty confident that Neanderthals did not have green skin. So we didn't call them Neanderthals. We called them orcs, and we beat them. And they could easily have a whole lot of things about that. There's so much mythology about the war between humans and orcs. We got medieval knights up against that. And if you're making it prehistorical, before 6,000 years ago, those medieval knights were all black. Every one of them. There were no white knights. And the orcs were white. We could easily have that. And there's so much culture that it'd be great to look at that. And these are interesting things. You don't need to change history. You just need to dig into history that really did represent that sort of thing. You could look at the Moorish conquest of um, Western Europe, Spain in particular. So 8th century, that's within our 6,000 years. And man, it's got black people enslaving white people, but we're not allowed to talk about that. In fact, the word slave came from Slavs, which were Russian or Eastern Europe. that was enslaved in such great numbers by the Moors, who were black, that just became our word for slave. And I mean, Moors also were known as Africans. So Africa didn't actually mean the whole of Africa, it meant just one tribe. It was such a powerful tribe. We named all of Africa after them. The Romans and the Greeks called them barbarians, and they liked that. Those were called Germans barbarians, but no, the ones that called themselves barbarians were black people. So all the history, it's all the mythology that's talking about barbarians, black people. Barbarians were black people. They named a thing called Barbary and Barbary Coast and all this sort of stuff. They were black people. So there's all this stuff where the black people were good and they could have great, amazing historical stuff with black people. They don't need to steal somebody else's history, somebody else's mythology, somebody else's stories. They don't need to do that. And I think it's ridiculous myself. But look, it's I understand why they want to do it, but yeah, um, yeah. So look, that's why that's why I support Trump. I do support Trump in the war in Ukraine. If he doesn't end the war in Ukraine, my support for him will end. If that war doesn't end anytime, sometime soon, or if he gives up on trying to end it, but I mean, it's not to say that I'm a Republican for life. I haven't been a Republican for life. It's been about 50-50 overall. And it'll depend on who runs the next time. I think I've said that I'd quite like, I can't say her name, but AOC, Horatio Ocario Cortez. Yeah, I think she'd be great from what I know of her. But if the Republican nominee was someone like, what's that girl's name? Tulsi Gabbard, she'd be a very good candidate for the Republicans. And I think if it was Tulsi Gabbard versus AOC, it would be tough to pick. I can't say for sure at this stage who I would prefer. I'd actually love it if they were the next two that ran. I think they would be two good candidates. It'd be nice to see America have two good candidates because I think both of them would be better than Trump. And I think both of them would be better than Joe Biden. And both of them would be better than Hillary Clinton. So I think America's had some bad candidates for a while, but Trump is doing, better than the alternative would. And this is not to say that he's a good leader, but I think that, yeah, I'm not supporting him as a great leader. I'm supporting him as better than the alternative. That's it. Yeah, I hope that's that's understood. All right, bye bye now. See you.